Welcome back, you filthy last Epoch players. So I've finally gotten to empowered monoliths. All the footage that you can see in the B-roll at the start of the video is me taking down anything that's empowered and everything that's empowered. At this stage, I've done about 110 levels of corruption, or 110 corruption, and this build can push to about 150 with the current gearing iteration. So if you didn't catch my first video, basically how this works is we use Void Cleave, we hit with the Void Cleave, and then we hit with the Erasing Strike, and then we also have an Echo Strike now, which is almost near max proc. And then basically we do a ton of crit, or an absolute level of crit. If I move my camera here, I'll show you exactly what I mean. So if we've got Void Cleave selected, we get Obliterator, and then Erasing Strikes always crit, so we have a 100% crit chance with our Erasing Strikes on this build. Now the other big thing about this build is also defensively. I'll move my head again. While I'm not overcapped in my elemental resistances, while it's a bit of an issue, it's not really, because we have an absolute ton of armor. We have nearly 4,000 armor, and we proc Vengeance as well, so we get even more armor. And then beyond that, we have nearly 60% as far as defenses go. And that means that we also mitigate 41%, because it's 70% as effective against non-physical damage. We mitigate 41% of inbound damage coming in as well, which means that compensates for fire and cold and most other forms of damages. Now, there are a few other things with the gearing that I've got in here too that mitigate dot as well using armor. So basically, we're almost like an armor stacker at this stage. But the other thing too, health is nearly at 2,000, which is like the average point of where health needs to be in this game. Regeneration's not great, but we have a fair crack of leech, so that's not too much of an issue. I think other doesn't really tell you here. Defensive stats, leech, melee damage, 16% leech, which is pretty good. Crit strike avoidance is almost maxed out as well, so that's not bad either. So yeah, overall, build feels good. It's probably not as good as like dot builds or like mage builds and stuff like that. Melee always has issues. In particular with some bosses, like you've really got to like come in, dive bomb, like go in, run around, hit, hope that your second hit procs, and then basically run around, dodge everything, and come back in. What I will say with this build though is it really makes you learn how the mechanics of bosses work, and that goes for basically any melee build. You really have to learn how bosses mechanically work, and once you understand that, it actually becomes really easy to play this game. Anyway, that being said, let's get into the video and let's talk about the gearing changes since last night. Okay, so we had a few drops during the day, and I've significantly changed my gear again, and this will be in the build planner down below in the description. But basically, helm-wise, I think I changed this slightly. I now have 26% increased armor and percentage increase in health as well, and strength increases armor, to my understanding as well. So it's behooven to get as much strength as you can into this build, be it not a strength stacker nonetheless. Amulet-wise, same amulet that I had last night, it's just this right now. Chest piece, I did change this, and part of this is because in the implicit, number one, it's got a ton of armor in it, and also 44% increased armor on it. And I did also despair roll on 2 vitality, which isn't great, but better than nothing. But it also has 62% increased echo damage when a skill has echoed, and my build always echoes, so it gets a free 62% damage as well. And also mana, because this build initially had some issues sustaining mana, so that fixes that too, with a couple of other things I made changes to. Now I changed from an axe to a sword, mainly because I got a 44% attack speed sword, and I managed to craft it up to a 186% increased void damage, which is a huge damage buff to Erasing Strike and Void Cleave. And the other thing too is I have 7% of melee damage leached as health into the implicit, which is significant. So this build feels really good, and you sustain long fights by basically relying on leech, and I have a few sources of leech in this build to get me up to 16%. Ring-wise, I didn't change the ring. I left it as is. Same with the belt. The belt's pretty much the same as well. Mana regeneration. Endurance threshold's not really needed, but percentage increased health makes this build a lot easier. I did get a better Siphon of Anguish as well, so I did switch out for that. Predominantly, I've got a lot more Void Leech, and I did drop Leech Rate, but that's okay. This gets me over the line. On my gloves, I changed these out as well. I now have 17% of armor. Mitigation also applies to damage over time, which is significant when you're versing bosses. I also managed to get a set of gloves with melee attack speed, which is bloody significant, crit strike avoidance, and just flat health, which was really good. So I actually get a ton of armor on this, which procs me up a hell of a lot. It's actually really hard to change these gloves out now because they're bloody awesome. Now, the biggest change here is Darkstride dropped. Because I am playing SSF here, I just don't think this game is worth playing a trade league on. I think it's more fun playing SSF. So the big advantage with Darkstrides, and these are pretty much best in socket, you get an additional Void Cleave charge, so you can have 2 Void Cleaves instead of 1 before it needs to recharge. Increased movement speed's pretty bleh, but also you get increased movement speed per added melee void damage, and this build stocks up on added melee void damage, so that's a pretty good stat to have on these boots, and this buffs this build up so I can move pretty fluidly, to be honest with you. And then I have 38% increased flat void damage, which, you know, more void damage the better. And then finally, I've still got the same Sentinel Relic. This, I just can't get anything better than this for now. And then in my idols, I did do some switching out, and I got some major idols here with increased echo damage and armor, which was actually a really good stat. And then again, 101% increased echo damage and flat void damage as well. And then I just sort of filled the gaps in with regeneration, void damage, life, armor, any elementals, resistances I could get. And so while this isn't perfect, this is sort of doing the job right now and sustaining monoliths pretty easily. But yeah, that's it for gearing. Nothing crazy at this stage. Okay, so skill setups. I still need to switch out my Rive, and I should make that a Rebuke setup so I could face tank stuff if things get too gnarly, but I might do that down in the future. I didn't really change anything major in the tree. I did max out Merciful, and I am putting point... I don't have any points left to allocate anywhere. I have maxed out Essence of Mind, certain Erasure as well, because I've maxed out Crit, and I did put 1 point in a Moment Stolen, so I could have Haste as well when I proc my, my Racing Strike. So when I'm smacking a boss, I can just go boop, and then run out, and Bob's your uncle, I'm okay if I can kite and dodge everything around me. Now beyond that, no changes to the setup for my lunge. Lunge is still the same. Same with Vengeance. I didn't really change anything for Vengeance, though I do need to reallocate 1 point. I can see I need to put 1 more point into Bolster. So let's just do that now. Alright, cool. So we'll level up Bolster, and we'll get more damage reduction, so this can get tankier. Now, Void Cleave, again, didn't really make any changes here. Just basically maxed out Dark Pathway first, then in the Interdepths, Precognition, and down and Focus to get Obliterator, because that's what gives this build damage. And then just went across to Abolisher and maxed out Abolisher, because it means melee void damage to low health enemies does 150%. Which is pretty big, which is why Void Cleave does equally, or not equally, but a significant portion of damage against enemies as well. But that's it for the skill setups, pretty basic stuff. Okay, so for the passive tree, I did actually keep 2 points in Time and Faith. I initially took it off and then realized I really needed this to sustain my mana. And just 2 points in this is all you really need. After I put points back into it, it surprisingly works amazingly well. Beyond that, for the Void Knight, I did clean up a few things, so I did get rid of Sorrow and Steel. Wasn't worth keeping in the build. I did take the point back out of Paladin because I did put points into Defiance, and I was like, I don't really need that, it's better used in here. So I have Abyssal Endurance, 2 minimum points in Temporal Corruption, and max out Void Blades. I did start leveling up Patient Doom, because that 60% is quite significant on the next attack every 3 seconds. And then World Eater, I've got 3% leech from melee damage and void damage, so that's giving me a fair bit of leech on my build, considering how big I hit. And then I have 7 points into Woe, 4 points maxed out into Singular Purpose, so I get 100% increased flat void damage. I did start putting more points into Eternal Form, maxed out Void Aegis, 2 points into Future Mind just to get mana regeneration kicking. Obviously maxed out Echoing Strikes, nearly maxed out Time Legion, into Avatar of Regret, and then Dread. Really basic, like, nothing crazy here. Everything has a synergy in it. There's no dot stats or anything like that. As I'm going to say, dot damage over time for those who are newer players. But yeah, really basic setup, and this achieves, I think, after this, what's that, 8% plus 10%, so 28% Echoing Strike. which is pretty good. So you got a 1 in 3 chance of proccing your big hit on a boss when you go in and dive bomb them with an erasing strike. But that's basically it for the passive tree setup. And all that will be in the build link down below in the build planner. Okay, so I hope this video helps you if you want to play a build like this. I hope this format works for people as well. This is very similar to how I make PoE build guides, but this game is very easy to make build guides for anyone who wants to follow them, or at least wants some guidance on how to get their build sort of aligned. Now, I was thinking I can min-max this build, but I do want to try out some other builds, and I actually had some ideas that came up. So I'm thinking of playing a Hand of Judgment Facebreaker, completely unarmed Judgment and Attunement stacker. Alternatively, Fire Bees. I got an idea for Forge Guard. Shield Throw using the new Stygian's Reprisal, and Lightning Multi-Strike character using Oriel's as well, which looks really cool, where Multi-Strike can proc smites, and then we would stack up lightning damage, so it'd be a really Paladin-centric build. Anyway, drop me a like in the, drop me a comment in the description for what you'd like to see from me next anyway, whether it be any of those other options or something else. But anyway, don't forget to like and sub to the channel if you like the video and the content, and check me out on Twitch when you get a chance. And anyway, until next time, I'll see you guys later, and have a good one.